Beautiful. Can you hear me all right and everything?
I
And
can more
all that
calling
good stuff?
Austin. I can hear you absolutely fine. So listen, Andy, great to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to meet you again, Guy. And yeah, good to have a little giggle about Only Fools and Horses as well. What a refreshing start to a Friday.
I know. I've been laughing myself silly over it, just watching it again. So just so many moments in it, and yeah, I always did wonder actually if it translated to other people that weren't of an age or an era or even from this country. Like Faulty Towers. Do people in Japan watch it and go, I don't know why they think that's funny, or is it funny?
Well, I've got an interlude on that. Being a Geordie who loved Only Fools and Horses, then moving to Australia, didn't land. So not Australia, but maybe other countries. Let's leave it open.
Well, there we go. So, oh dear. Anyway, so that's the word. That's me binging Netflix at a ridiculous time. So listen, Andy, I know who you are. By definition, I've invited you on, so of course I know who you are. But it'd be just great for you to introduce yourself, say what you do right now, and then we'll get into that whole focus that you have in life.
No, that's awesome, Guy. And it's a pleasure to join you. I've listened to a few of these, and I love the organic nature of them. So it's a real pleasure to be here. But yeah, my name's Andy Holmes. So I'm the Global Head of Wellbeing for RB, which is the company behind Dettol, which a lot of us have become very familiar with, but also brands like Nurofen, Gaviscon, Lemsip, Strepsils, etc., etc. So fully global health and hygiene company, and yeah, an incredibly big but exciting challenge ahead.
And is it now just RB? Because RB's, I'm saying this wrong, reckitt Beckenhauser?
Benckiser. Yeah, it used to be reckitt Benckiser. We are now RB.
Just RB. Okay, because that's
RB.
Just right. Okay, good. So in terms of the role that you inhabit, it's a role that almost it's a new role in the
sense
of the way the world looks at what might be of value in an organization. So what's it? What's the span of that role, and what's its meaning in an organization, regardless of the one that you happen to be in?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question, and it's when I announced it, obviously on LinkedIn, there was an incredible wave of support, which was for me was something I wasn't expecting. Not because of me personally, but more so that the community really seemed to value that a company like RB had taken the step of making a formal appointment in this space. And I think it was, as much as anything with the pandemic, there's a real need for people to believe in the statements that organizations are making. And certainly during the course of 2020, I saw a lot of organizations making a lot of statements and a lot of pledges around well-being and around what we were doing, et cetera, but without really putting a lot of skin in the game. The yoga classes, that kind of stuff is great, but it has to be something that's much more deep-rooted within an organization. It has to be genuine, it has to be believable, and it has to, in essence, be organic. Some of this has to be for the people, by the people. It can't just be a deployment. So I think that's the first big thing I would say. The second thing is the role in itself is whatever it needs to be. I think as COVID has taught us, if we'd put this role in place 18 months ago, the agenda and the scope of a role like this would be potentially very different to that which it is now. Obviously, you see the mental health and well-being side of things really coming through strong. You look at diversity and all the other issues that the more social and global issues that exist. And all of these have, tentacles into well-being. They all have an influence on the way that we feel, the way that we sustain ourselves, and how we exist. So I think certainly within our organization, we're trying to look at it very much as a whole person picture. So it's not about work or life balance. It's not about work-life balance. It's one person. A person is a person. Everyone has an individual journey around well-being, and everyone has their own needs, which are influenced by their own unique set of circumstances. So this role at RB is about raising awareness. It's about, rallying the people to really come around it. It's about changing the narrative of well-being and about how well-being is our way of sustainably thriving in an organization like RB. But ultimately, our well-being will dictate what we can deliver in terms of goods and services and products to our customers and consumers. So it's absolutely imperative that we are our best selves as much of the time as we can be, in order that we can, fulfill our promise and our fight to our customers and consumers outside of that.
So if I've heard that correctly, there's this overarching concept of what well-being might need to be, but understanding that even though some things are probably inherently true, your relationship with it will be your own.
Yeah, exactly.
For you, it might be, for one person it's going for a run, that could be an anathema to somebody else, but what I like to do is that just means having some space just to think, whatever it is.
Absolutely. No, Guy, you've absolutely hit it on the head. And I think one of the challenges has been that, I would say, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, corporates have really jumped on the gym sessions, the access passes to gyms, yoga sessions, eating initiatives, weight loss, steps challenges, all this sort of stuff. And they're all great enablers and great momentum builders. But quite often they can be quite exclusive. They can mean that a lot of people, arguably the 60-70% of people in the middle who don't perceive they have a challenge or a problem or a need, or don't feel they can or have the capacity to, just won't access it. And I think, that's the challenge. Well-being is about the organic nature of a community coming together and providing, interpersonal support for each other in order to, get to those sort of better levels where we're enjoying life. I think, as you've alluded to, one of the challenges that COVID has brought us is that it's not necessarily that everyone has a mental health problem or everyone has a physical health problem or an underlying general health problem. It's just that a lot of people, yes, there are those people, but a lot of people are just not really thriving. They're not enjoying what they do on a daily basis. They're not their best version of themselves. And I think during COVID, we've put a lot of coping mechanisms individually and as corporates into place to try and mitigate against some of the impact of COVID. And we haven't necessarily updated those. So we're left with routines that aren't necessarily particularly fulfilling. We're left with daily cadences that don't really make us thrive or don't really give us that essence of thrive. And some about well-being is really changing the narrative to have the conversation to say, is what we're doing right? Is it actually making us happy? Is it bringing our best self? And if not, how do we start to make the small changes across a lot of different areas rather than trying to search for the big lever that's going to change everything for everyone straight at once?
Yeah, that's a big packet to unpack in some respects.
It is. Yeah.
Because people's relationships with their own inner voice, their relationships with their own sense of physical self, their et cetera, we could no doubt go on that one for quite some time. So, and of course, it's where we have a responsibility, which might be different to where we have a duty of care, and what's personal and none of your flipping business. And there's a whole set of things there that, where is it invasive or where is it a helping hand? So I imagine there's a lot. It's especially when you've got a very large, diverse and globally placed workforce. Are there different relationships with well-being in different parts of the world, as in it's
absolutely. I think every culture, every region will have a slightly different a different predisposed set of health factors. Certain areas of the world be very heavy on diabetes. Other areas of the world be very heavy on whether it's malnutrition or time zone challenges, which means people don't sleep, or certain trends in terms of socialization that people have. But I think the other side of things is that there's a big gap at the moment. So one thing is access to. So we have a big thing at RB about access to the world. The world's best health and well-being is not it's not a privilege, it's a right. So that's a really key part of what we do. So access is one thing, and a real fight around that. But the second thing is matching up responsibility and capability. So, in a lot of instances, you might say, well, a lot of managers, so Deloitte have done a paper on this, where a lot of managers, about 3/4 of managers, feel it's their responsibility to care for someone and be there to support someone's mental health, for example. Less than 20% actually feel they have the capability or the tools or the resources to do so. So it's about identifying where are the pressure points, where are the acute things that we need to address with a matter of urgency. But then on top of that, where we identify those, how do we identify the person who should be responsible and ensure that they have the capabilities to match their responsibility? But the other thing is making sure that where we shouldn't be responsible, where we're not qualified, where people should be being referred to or supported into a different type of care, that is happening as well, rather than people kind of getting stuck halfway between. As I said before, the big bulk of things is the 60% in the middle who aren't elite athletes. They're not doing triathlons or Ironmans every day. But the bulk of people who sit in an organization who just aren't maybe, thriving and buzzing on what they do quite in the same way that they used to, because those are the people who, over a duration, an enduring period of time, those behaviors, those traits may become chronic, and that's when you start to have, the challenges start to come through.
And listen, when you're top of the tree, right? It's self-motivating. The targets are there. The financial outcomes can be greater. So there's a whole set of things that are more geared towards somebody being on point in some respect because of. But when you're in that space of, my job is what it is, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I want to come and do a bloody good day's work. It doesn't have those inherent shifts or changes or just leaving the office or going places. No, I sit at my desk in that space, and that's where I have to be 90% of the time. It's got those inherent challenges. I'm interested in, and course correct me here if I say something you go, no. Because Guy's world isn't obviously everybody else's. But when you think about stepping out of RB really and just inherently your view on the world, I've got this thing around, I hear corporate social responsibility. And in that, I've mentioned this a few times on other episodes, I have this sense of, yes, we've got a gym, or we let you go and help the local school one day a year, or like that. So it's almost the overt marketing tool of what it is. And I almost think, take off the word corporate and just call it social responsibility. And what I hear in what you're saying is, no, if we're putting the right people in the right jobs, if we're maybe, we talk about giving somebody feedback skills because it's what the job requires. But actually, if that means they can go home and they can have better conversations at home because they're good at listening and they're good at receiving feedback and giving feedback, and on the course they learn not to interrupt, and that means when they go home, the other person feels listened to. Then doesn't that affect the quality of their lives at home, which affects society, which affects their quality of life and their kind of foundational strength? Resilience.
Absolutely.
Thinking? Well, I'm sure it does, but
no, absolutely. I think there's a couple of bits I would pick up on. I think the point about sort of the very most senior leaders, the sort of the incentives and the focus being there. I think one of the challenges is that those people, whilst those things are there, there's almost I think when people look upwards at them, there's a perception that, well, it's okay for you to take time out, or for you to fail, or for you to step back, or for you to make a pledge or whatever else. But I think when you actually talk to people in these positions, and this isn't just RB, I mean, I was saying yesterday I did a panel on this, and one of the things that becomes very apparent is that those individuals themselves have their own unique set of challenges, their own unique set of pressures that they put on themselves. And whilst they might not externalize a lot of those emotions or beliefs or feelings, they internalize a lot of it. So, sometimes you have someone who's almost locked themselves in their own pressure cooker because they believe that they have to be that person, so they don't have those outlets. So I think, certainly at RB, but my belief as well is that regardless of hierarchy, we should be treating everyone in exactly the same, in the same way, with the same sort of, the same attitude or the same agenda. I think the comment you make about, if we train people, who give people the right competencies and skills inside work, it benefits the society outside of work. Absolutely. I think where my thinking is at with the wellbeing space is that one of the biggest things is that you can give someone the competency and skills, but if you don't enable them with the capacity to do it, or the energy to be able to deliver upon that, look, we can all have the right intent, but as well as I do, if we wake up in a bad mood, if you skip a meal because of a lunch meeting, you're not going to be that ideal person, communicating in the right way, listening in the right way. So, I'm a firm believer in that the environment that we create has to be such that it enables an individual or employee to sustain themselves in the right way. If you achieve that, then moods and emotions become more predictable. You do that, then behavior becomes more consistent. Behavior becomes culture. Behavior becomes the impact on others. So, I think quite often, I see in organizations, we work a lot on the behaviors, leadership competencies, et cetera, but we don't really take the time to consider, well, what's influencing that behavior? It's not just the interaction with that person that's influenced the behavior. It's the moods and emotions that you're not rationalizing that are really kind of putting you in a bit of a funk that shifts the type of person you are. If you come on this call and you'd had an awful night's sleep and you'd spent 3 hours on the phone with the inland revenue, you probably wouldn't be bubbly, happily guy talking about owning fools and horses. So I think our duty of care is the environment, but also the way that we energize and the way that we provide that sustenance or enable sustenance, especially in a remote world. So, it's become one of the big challenges. People have started to, sacrifice without realizing the basics that they need to be a good person in the world. We've heard a lot about people working ridiculous hours at their desks, spending all of their time on Zoom calls. And, the science shows us that this is massively fatiguing. So some of the things we're looking at is how do we start to change the blend and the mix of those meetings, those calls, those conversations, so that, we give our brains that chance to sort of, just decompress a bit so we can be that consistent leader or colleague.
So there's something there about the structural setup of an organization that allows certain things to be true. Like I've just noticed I'm getting eye strain because flipping
your eyes are getting worse. I said to my wife the other day, I said, I'm a bit worried. Like I feel like my eyes, really not good.
I know I've just been playing with the light. I've got to get the lighting. I may have to I've got to do something that because I'm on a monitor all day, and so there's something about organizations. Okay, fine. Yeah, we can make sure people have got monitors, but there's something again about that structure of a person's life and their role that says actually they're mandating it's a computer and it's a Zoom call all day. Somebody said to me, as much as I love being at home in some respects, well, for some people, of course, they don't have a 5-bedroom detached house. No, there's me, there's the one living room. We're both in it. And one person said to me, my relationship was pretty well dependent on the fact that we both went to work. As in, we love each other, but this is, waking up with that person and going to bed with that person in that same environment. So, and I know a company can't necessarily dictate for that, but recognizing that, and that triggered me off because one very senior person said to me, I can't see why anybody would want to go back to work, Guy. I said, because you live in a 5-bed detached property and you've got your own office.
It's a great shout, and I think this is where part of the challenge comes. And we've had these conversations internally where you can mandate certain things. You can say, no meetings after 6 o'clock. You can block lunch hours, et cetera, et cetera. But we've got close to 40,000 people in our organization across 72 countries. So booking a lunch hour ain't really going to work because everyone's in a different time zone, et cetera, et cetera. So that becomes a challenge. The other side of things is that if you mandate something very quickly, you're going to tread on someone's toes. You're going to compromise one person's daily cadence to benefit someone else's. So I think this is where part of the challenge comes in that you can control certain things, but arguably the better thing to do is to influence the way that people think about well-being, the way that they are self-aware of their own well-being, their ability to self-care, but also care for others. And by doing that, they will adjust their behaviors and their patterns to the benefit of themselves and others as well. So that you get almost an organic kind of what's better for the group kind of view, rather than the organization does this. Because let's be honest, if we say no means after 6 o'clock, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work your way around that.
Well, there's a couple of things, isn't there? Number one is, depending on what I'm trying to achieve in my career, if I'm of a certain age and I just want to go for gold for 2 years in my career, then I might want to work all the hours, and that suits my career rhythm. Other people, except, so as you're right, you can't mandate for an individual because by definition, especially when you've got 40,000 people. But I think, and again, please correct me here, but I have this kind of image of the fact that we talk about psychological safety in the workplace, and people, that means that people can offer their thoughts, etc. Fine. But actually, I sometimes think that organizations have gone down the path of we need to be so safe that people can offer anything they want and we'll try and adjust accordingly to help them. As opposed to, well, actually, why don't we educate? Why don't we give people permissions? Why don't we actually say, actually, the accountability and the responsibility for your own well-being does sit with you. But if we're doing something structurally or behaviorally that is an anathema to that, and it's destructive or sabotages you, not just because you have you only want to work an hour a day, but if we have a way of doing things that is fundamentally flawed, or a manager that's behaving in a certain way, because to own the well-being of your entire workforce at an ownership level is probably a route to failure. But to take on board the space for people to offer if there's a problem, and to educate them so they own. And I like to go for a swim first thing in the morning at 5 o'clock. Oh my God, really? No, but that's the way I like to do it. Versus, you know, it almost doesn't matter. So I'm hearing you saying that it's about the individual having a relationship with their own need. And if we're getting in the way as a company, and it's not just you're the only one, but in essence, we're creating a problem, then there's the psychological safety then to offer that in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because, you know, we've got to recognize that, you know, at the moment, in the majority of countries, everywhere that individuals look outside of themselves, you know, people are losing jobs, losing financial security, losing loved ones, losing freedom to, you know, go about their lives in the way that they want to, that kind of thing. So, you know, I think even if we were doing things as an organization to say you can and can't do this, all we're doing is compounding the problem. You know, we're going to put restrictions on someone by trying to do the right for someone else. So, you know, I think we're trying to be light on the mandatory things, or the rules, or the formality of things that we do, and really approach it from a self-awareness point of view. Own your own well-being. We will provide you with the resources and access to specialists. And this is not resources as in, you know, gym memberships and all the rest of it, although a lot of our countries do have that sort of thing. But it's more around resources as to, you know, take it and run with it in the way that works for you. So I personally don't care if we've got, you know, 1,000 pockets of 3 people who are doing something together that works for them, that enables them, that allows them to be at their best more of the time in work and life and play, everything else. Or whether we've got, you know, 3 regions who are all mandated doing the same thing. I really don't care. It's about us leading the narrative, the ethos, and the believable authenticity of this within our organization. So it's got to be visible, it's got to be genuine, and it has to be consistent. So we're moving away from awareness days, for example. We could have an awareness day every day of the week. It isn't necessarily going to change anything. It just becomes noise. So we're moving away from that. So it's about a consistent, believable, authentic narrative, accompanied by activities and actions and communities that form. And, you know, that really is what we're angling at. The other thing is that we've got to think from an organization point of view, how do we start to learn from the science? So things like daily cadences, circadian rhythms, cortisol profiles, that kind of thing. The science tells there are times in the day where it is better to do certain types of meetings. There's a postprandial slump after lunch where you ain't going to get the best collaboration out of people. So why wouldn't we pay attention to that science? Not tell people what they do at what time in the day, but just educate them around it so that they can start to say to someone, you know what, Guy, I don't work so well early afternoon in terms of this type of thing. So why don't we do this first in the morning? Let's do it as a walk and talk. And that's kind of where we want things to go. We want people to create their own best way of working, but do so in a self-aware way so that it's done collaboratively rather than for me.
And isn't this interesting? Can I go into that Zoom meeting? I mean, pre-COVID, the answer would have been probably, are you crackers?
I don't know what's coming here, guys. You better finish the sentence.
With COVID and this familiarity with video medium, there's a meeting at 9 o'clock. I'm going to walk the dog. I'm going to have my headphones in, and I'm going to be absolutely in that meeting. You know, but it's a 1 hour walk, and it's a 1 hour meeting, and what probably not if I'm the key presenter, but you know, but can I not contribute? and I'll be on the video, and maybe I'll go, I'm just walking, I am here, and I'm listening, and I click it. I don't know, whatever it is. And actually,
no, Guy, this is absolutely it, and it's about trust. A lot of this comes down to trust. Psychological safety is a product of being trusted. Let's be frank about it. I've literally, just before this call, I did a 1 hour Zoom meeting with my broader team. I was on a turbo trainer in the garden.
Can't I be on my water rower?
I was on a turbo trainer. I did 30 Ks in an hour. I contributed just as everyone else did. It provided, I like to think, a little bit of inspiration. People saying, I'm going to do that next time. I'm going to go for a walk while we do this. And, I think this is part of it. It's, communicate with people. Look, if we need to be on and we all need to be reviewing a document, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of meetings where we don't need to be staring at a PowerPoint. We can have a conversation. The other thing we've sort of started to do is say, well, we've shortened our meetings so that they're shorter in duration, which raises the intensity a little bit. You can play with that for yourself, but also there's forced breaks in between. But the other thing is, start a meeting and commit to yourself. That I'm going to finish my meeting 6 minutes early, not 10 minutes, 6 minutes. And then when you finish 6 minutes early, explain to people why you finished 6 minutes early, because it gives them the breather, and they can't book anything in that 6 minutes because Outlook doesn't really by default let you book for 6 minutes. So, things like that make a big difference. But it is about, communication, be inventive with things. Little things like out of offices. I took yesterday afternoon off to hang out with my little boy. And on my out of office, it said, I won't be answering emails because I'm going to be hunting dinosaurs or playing football. And what that means is that when someone gets that out of office, they won't ping me that email because they'll think, oh, right, okay, I don't want to infringe on that. But also when they do connect with them, they'll say, did you find any? And it's a different conversation. It perpetuates this conversation about well-being, about being present when you're not in the office. And those little things make massive differences to the narratives that perpetuate through an organization.
Yes, there's a difference, isn't there, between it being allowed and tolerated. That's our narrative. That is who and what we are. And many moons ago, I read a book, Richard Semler's book, The 7 Day Weekend. So I read the one, which was Maverick and 7 Day Weekend, and it kind of started. I might be absolutely butchering this, but I seem to remember he said, if I open up a PowerPoint presentation on a Sunday at 2:00 and work for 2 hours, why can't I take my kids to the cinema on a Wednesday after lunch? Because really the reality is, and this was, I don't know, 15 years ago I read this, but I think, we weren't using all these words that we're using now. But I think what he was trying to say was, listen, I'm paid to get a job done. And, the caricature of me being present and suited and booted and presenting myself in that particular way. God, blimey, do we really have to do that? And I think that's how adults, in fact, are we professional enough to not have to utilize the veneer of professionalism?
I completely, I agree with that. And I think, our first line would always be, I think it's part of who we are. If we talk about the freedom to succeed, it's a big, part of who we are in RB. And, the freedom to succeed would be that, if you said that to me, I spent 2 hours on my PowerPoint, I would actively be sort of saying, did you need to do that? Like, did you get it done? And I'd want to make sure that you weren't feeling like you needed to, or you should, because as an organization, we would never want people to be working out of hours. We understand that people,
but if I wanted to, because it suited my freedom of I've got, blimey, I want to, but it's okay because I know the permission is there that don't worry, well, I'm hunting dinosaurs on Wednesday after 2, so don't worry about me.
And look, we
looking for that quid pro quo, right?
We would never expect an individual to say, is it okay if I take 2 hours back because I've done this? But for the same token, if other people in the office or in the work day are expecting to be able to communicate with them, all we'd sort of say is, just make sure that people who might be expecting to contact you know that you're not there, kind of thing, so that things don't stagger. But, I like to think that we have that quite an acute level of self-accountability in that space. So people, would naturally sort of inform people if they're not going to be around, kind of thing. But I think the big shift, certainly through COVID, is how do you start to bring the whole person conversation into work? So rather than only talking about work at work, why can't you bring personal into work? We sacrifice a lot of personal time for work, so why can't we bring a bit of our humanness into the workspace as well? And I think, one of the big things that, I was working with a guy yesterday, Nick Hollis, who's a Everest explorer and all the rest of it. But he had this phrase, and he said, the business world is so much tougher. Endurance business is so much more tougher than endurance adventuring, because in endurance adventuring, you get rest days. And he said, the one thing you need to consider in the business world is, when do you get strong? And what he meant by that was that when you train, when you do anything, athletics or whatever, you build your strength when you recover.
There, right?
And it was just one phrase, when do you get strong? And I thought, you know what? How many businesses have almost strength building periods in where you back off to allow people to re-energize, recoup before they go again?
That is really interesting. One of the things I always say to an exec group at some point is, how important is your own development? And everybody goes, really, very important. And you go, great. What does that look like? Now, some people will go, I'm an active reader. Some people will go, I do take the time. But the majority actually haven't read a book in a long time, haven't taken a day out just to go and reflect, haven't, etc. And the relationship with learning is, it's either a course or, there's been mandated. Yeah. But if learning is I've learned to recover, I've learned that it's okay to take time and space to reflect, and not seeing that as not being an output, because actually it's your recovery to be strong, to go back into the fray and do it all again.
And again, the science is there. Like my background, I've got a physiology degree, a human physiology degree, but all the science is there in that, if you don't do that, then your cognitive function is impaired. So, one of the sort of the partners that we're working with, they're very sort of heavily into this and looking at how we cadence the day to ensure that we're not making strategic decisions when we're cognitively very down on energy levels. So that sort of thing is really, really important. And I think I've always been an advocate of the fact that, whether you say it's, well-being has to have teeth, or we've got to have well-being skin in the game. But, well-being, I think pre-COVID was very much, or in a lot of senses, was a nice to have. It was that almost that corporate social responsibility piece that you referred to before, that organizations of a certain size should do this because they have a duty of care. And I think that's great. But in order for it really to fly, at some point, well-being is going to come up against the P&L. And organizations are going to look, I'm just being frank, organizations are going to say, well, hang on a second, how does this fit? And so I think there's two lenses to well-being. One is the underlying experience that people have of life whilst working with a certain company, what they take home, energy-wise, personality-wise, skills-wise, contribution to society, all that stuff. But the other side of things is, what is the performance impact of well-being and the consistency and the sustainability? So I think where I'm looking at it is, how do you start to look at well-being or your human capacity, as I call it, versus your demands in terms of business requirement? And then what if you could then start to match human capacity to business demand? And you do that in pulses as you go through the year, so that we're preparing, we're peaking, and then we're recovering as we go through the year. And we manage the cadence of the business along with the human capacity, or vice versa. You can intervene or you can implement things ahead of time to ensure that we deliver on
continual flow of tasks that are just,
rather than just foot on the gas 365. Yeah, exactly.
Let's say, well, let's peak here. Let's take our foot off that gas.
Yeah.
To give that group, maybe it's not everybody at the same time, but to give that project group, that just spent a year and a half implementing the biggest IT change we've ever. Give them, it's critical. Yeah, but would it matter if it was 12 months or 13? And if it was 13 months, then that would just give them a little bit of time in between. These are the little things, aren't they?
But I think that, again, it comes back to as well how we measure well-being, how we measure well-being and human capacity. So often corporates, and again, been to panels where you hear the big companies talking about this, and it's amazing how quickly the positive intent of a well-being program in a corporate becomes about reportable metrics. Not necessarily impact metrics, but reportable metrics to say, we've demonstrated a shift that our people are more active, therefore the risk to health is less. And for me, it's not about that. It's about saying, well, if you think about well-being, the output of being well or feeling well is more consistency and more contentment. So you're more balanced as a human being, as an individual. Euphoric happiness is not really realistic. You're going to come down at some point. So contentment and consistency. But then that translates to engagement, because if you're in a balanced space, you can make informed choices about what you engage in and where you invest yourself. So when we think about well-being, there's lots of things you can measure: sleep, activity, steps, et cetera, nutrition, whatever else. But there needs to be a simple measure of how do we know that our people are in general more well and closer to their best more of the time. So I think that there is a challenge about the need to report and retrospectively justify or demonstrate value, versus accepting that well-being is a human thing. It's a human being thing, and it's a choice. Not everyone's going to engage, not everyone's going to go into it for the same degree, but you can aim for a general trend or a general shift in someone's ability to apply themselves or choose where they invest themselves.
And this is where it becomes interesting, because when you talked about cutting down on the well-being days, it's like, well, do you understand that having a good night's sleep helps you? Yeah. Do you understand that eating rubbish food doesn't help you? Yeah. I mean, most people know.
Yeah, it's not yet. Most people know that stuff. Yeah.
It's like customer service trained. You know that means just like be nice to the other person. Yeah. Okay. As in, it's not in itself complex, but how many overweight people do I see? How many, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a very fine line, isn't it, between it becoming, I suppose, from the commercial driver, and I don't mean the FD, but from that commercial imperative, at what point is this something we should be doing, to something that actually might even be getting in the way? And you run that risk sometimes of, well, this is impacting on my well-being. And if that becomes a stick to hit the company with, then actually it becomes its own problem. And I am working with an organization right now where they've already gone too far. And that if they go, well, this impacts on my resilience, this impacts on my well-being, they've got a get out of jail free card for pretty well doing anything they want. And it's maybe because it's still in its infancy. We haven't found our balance with it. We haven't necessarily found the indicators or the measures or the and we're still trying to make sense of what that would mean and how far it goes. And
I mean, I think there's a as I said before, I think there's a real sort of honesty and authenticity side to these things, and I think where I said before, well-being needs to have skin in the game or needs to have teeth or whatever else. Like we're a corporate organization. We're not a charity. We are there to deliver shareholder returns. We're there to better the lives of our consumers and customers. But we are a business, and people make choices about where they go to work, where they're employed, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you need to some degree, put your faith and trust the fact that people have joined your organization for a reason, and you hope that that's for the right reason. And unless you have professed your organization to be something that it's not, there shouldn't be any surprises there. I think there's a challenge there, because I think a lot of organizations externally paint themselves to be one thing and then internally are something else. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is that when we talk about well-being, we're not saying, you know what, Guy, take 3 hours out 3 times a week, because that's not realistic. The business would stall, the business would stop. What we are saying is that we will give you the tools and allow you the flexibility and empower you with the freedom to be, freedom to succeed, freedom to do what you need to do. But what we're encouraging you to do is, the way that we're approaching well-being is make small adjustments in 5 or 6 areas, not one massive adjustment in one. The usual thing, people want to lose weight, so they diet. The problem with dieting is that there are knock-on effects all over the rest of your life, in terms of energy, in terms of mood, in terms of et cetera, enjoyment, whatever else it might be. The same exists for well-being. So if we were to say to people, right, if you feel like you're working too many hours, stop working so many hours. The problem is that other people are going to need to work those hours, want to work those hours, that cadence might work for them. So it's about smaller adjustments in more areas on a more consistent basis, so that progressively and organically, we start to raise the human capacity of the organization. We start to adjust the cadence of the organization rather than putting an intervention in place that says, right, from this day forward, everything changes. Because I don't think that's realistic and it's not going to be sustainable.
Are there any organizations out there that you look to with an admiration for their approach to this, and maybe the way that you go, that actually is the place to head for?
I think the challenge is that there are lots of organizations out there who do elements of it well. I don't think there are a lot of organizations who get the whole thing right. Certainly when you look at big corporates, they're sort of, FTSE or whatever, it's difficult because you've got so many people and there's pressures around what you do on a daily basis. I think the other challenge is that there are a lot of organizations that are perceived to be very good in a certain space. Obviously I won't name them, but then when you speak to people who are engaged or involved within them, it's very different. And I think in some ways that's the most damaging piece, because you mentioned psychological safety earlier in the piece. If you're stuck somewhere where everyone else thinks that it's fine, but it's a nightmare, but you can't talk about it, that's not going to be a good place for you to stay for very long.
And I don't know this as a personal fact, but I had read that there are places like a Microsoft, etc., where if you're not on the proverbial happy clappy bus, then you're going to be penalized. Now, that could be one person's social media outburst, so I wouldn't want to comment on it, but I think it's indicative of, you hear these stories of these large organizations where there is this probable, not even a veneer, where I actually believe that the most senior players believe that that is the environment that they have underneath them. But a little bit like the Queen thinking that the world smells of paint because there's somebody in front of her making it great. They're being faced up to with maybe a set of truths that aren't actually the experience of the poor bugger 6 levels down, who's been driven in a certain way. So I don't actually often think that the people at the top are, I mean, some may be consciously, unaware of it, but I actually don't think a lot of them believe it's a problem, or they think they're on it because they're being told of these programs that are running and we have these things going on in their organization. And it's almost as if what you haven't done is your due diligence of really going into your people to find out the truth.
And I think this is it's absolutely on the mark. And I think this is where, going back to the point I made before about, be careful about the metrics that you use to measure this, because a senior leader could sit there and say, well, we've got assistance programs in all these markets, we've got gym memberships, we've got this, we've got that, so we've ticked all the boxes, and no one's telling me that there's a problem. But for example, with us, we might look at engagement. Engagement will very quickly tell you if there's an issue. It won't allow you to pinpoint it, but it will tell you that there's something not right. And I think that is important to really sort of take a step back and think, right, engagement is a choice. Engagement is about capacity. Engagement is about safety. Engagement is about belief in where someone is. And I think, that sort of thing is really, really key. So, yes, sometimes senior leaders aren't getting the feedback, but also sometimes we're guilty of measuring the things that we want to see. Not necessarily being prepared to measure things that might tell us something we don't want to hear.
I've been working with an organization the last couple of years, and when I first started working with them, they had an employee engagement pulse survey, whatever you want to call it. And look at how people love working here. And I go, yeah, but what's the uptake on it? Oh, it's about 20%. Well, okay.
Yeah.
So 20% that like working here, who understand or maybe want to play the game, have contributed, but there's 80% of your workforce that don't see any point. Because he said, well, some of them don't see the value in it. No, they don't see the point in protesting.
Because it's absolutely true.
What they want to see sometimes.
Yeah, no, we've been on journey with engagement surveys over the years as well, and a lot of the organisations that I've got connections with have had a similar thing, and sometimes there's an automatic reaction about the frequency of them or justification as to why we've got low uptake or whatever. I think honestly the biggest shift that I've seen is that participation in surveys like that is a massive reflection on the faith that people have in that something's going to happen as a result. Yes, there's a psychological safety. Am I going to put this in? Can they identify me? Will there be collateral because of that? But I think the other side to it is, if I don't think anything's going to change if I input or whether I don't, why would I? I mean, who cares? But I think now more than ever, people, and because of some of the generational shifts as well, people want to be part of change. They want to be part of shaping the environment and the future and the cultures of where they are. People care about that stuff. It's no longer sort of job for life where I turn up, I sign up when I'm 18 and I'm going to be leave when I'm 65. People have a lot of choice, a lot of, arguably not as much now, but in a lot of areas, a lot more choice and a lot more freedom. And therefore, I think as organizations, we need to be really cognizant and really conscious of the fact that people don't need to be here anymore. And I think one thing that with RB is that we know that the people who are with us are really invested in making it a place and shaping it to be a place that they want to be part of. More so than other companies, other big corporates I've been part of, where you feel like you're just a number. I know it sounds cheesy, but I think people at RB, there's a believability to what we stand for and the direction we're going in.
And I'd step away from, because I don't know anything about RB other than it's called RB. And well, yeah, but what I notice is these two things. One of the some of the things around well-being, I think, don't cost money. Is what I'm hearing. I mean, some of it does because it's a program or it's a process, but just letting people or listening to people properly. I think people don't necessarily expect to get what they want, but they want to feel as if they've been. I call it giving somebody a damn good listening to. And that idea about that is because I had a boss who, probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 times out of 10, I'd ask for something, I get it. And 4 or 5 times out of 10, I'd be told no. And I never felt worse about the no's than I did or better about the yeses than I did the no's, because he gave me a damn good listening to. I felt I'd been heard. And that made me felt of value, which et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think some of these things, there might be a program, a process, an education piece, but some of it is if I'm going to treat you like a human being, then that can go a long way. So it's interesting about what is going to cost money, but what is about a way of us doing things around here. Because, that's how human beings respond, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely. I always call it the why behind the what, but quite often, for anyone who knows the sort of triune brain theory, but our executive brains will splurge out, phrases, words, buzz topics that we know are socially acceptable and will resonate with other people without having to really divulge too much more. The why behind the what is, why is that person saying it? Why does it matter? Why do they feel that way? And why are they communicating in that way about this? And I think that is, it's the EQ, but it's the buzz, the sort of the buzz topic or the buzz focus of the last couple of years is, how do we dial up EQ? And it's about being more human. I think, we're on the crest of a wave right now where COVID has made a lot of us a lot more human than we used to be. And so I think what we're trying to do is really embrace that, take the fact that people have an intent to support each other, be there for each other, to pull together. And how do we encourage that rather than training people to do it?
I also like this COVID thing in some. I mean, I hate COVID in the concept, but I saw this meme which said, that job that you've been told for 30 years you can't do from home. It turns out you can. And I think that humor is a kind of window into the bullshit that people always knew. But actually, instead of spending the last 10 or 20 years creating a trusted workforce who actually have their home life, as part of their working life, you've never done that. You've never allowed us as culturally, or because you're so driven by your needs, you want me present, you want me there, and your fears. And I think people are very suddenly alert to, it's all still moving on, isn't it? So I'm always suspicious when people say it's a new future. I go, well, yeah. I mean, one of the issues, of course, that it all snaps back into place, and then you've got an even greater disenfranchised group of people, because
this is going to be the big thing, isn't it? You know, I
tasting freedom.
No, well, but you hear these, these phrases and these surveys, the new normal, and it's not new normal. It's the future. It's right now, and it's the future. That's it. As soon as you say normal, then I think it conjures up pictures of people thinking, oh, well, it's back to normal. And that's, it's absolutely not the case. I think we've come so far that some of this is going to be a fundamental shift that isn't going to go back. There will be an element of elasticity to it. But I think the biggest thing that we can do moving forward, certainly from a well-being, from a leadership perspective, is just dial up the human. Don't rush to measure it. Don't measure to try and quantify it. It's about, allow it to grow legs, allow it to perpetuate, and just try and sense what's happening rather than measuring everything. Because right now is not about control. Right now is about being present. It's about being in the moment, about being good to each other, and just, dial up the IQ, listen for the why behind the what, and act, be close to your feelings and emotions. It's the best thing we can do for each other.
Maybe there's a thing there, just let it become something. Well, what? Don't know. But as long as it's positive, as long as it's adding value, let's maybe surprise ourselves as an organization.
Absolutely.
And be happy with the unknown, as long as it's going in a positive way.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to give it. Maybe next year, maybe a year from now, we have to start to go, okay, now it's leveled a bit. Let's understand the value.
Yeah.
Let's not kill it by measuring it, right?
Yes. As soon as you measure it, you start to constrict it, you start to set it in stone. And very quickly, once you've done that, the environment will continue to shift and it will be out of date. So I think, let's accept that things are a little bit fluid for now. Let's focus on the things that we can control, which is the understanding of ourselves, the decisions we make around ourselves. And then, let's be at our best a bit more of the time. And that impact will hopefully resonate with others who will then, sort of follow suit and take the conversation forward as well. So, I think it's not rocket science. The challenge in all of this is about resisting the temptation to react, but being much more balanced and consistent in terms of how we act.
Yeah. And to over validate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, Andy, I'm alert to time, because I've just had oh my gosh, I've got something else happening, and you've probably got something else happening as well, but I've stolen your time from you. So listen, I'm going to press the stop button. I'll speak to you for a few minutes afterwards, but just on a personal note, I'm sure for those listening as well, you we're not often solving things on these episodes, but I think it's two people talk about a topic is a catalyst for others to have a frame of reference, or maybe to be interested in.
Absolutely.
It's about. So just from me to you, thank you so much for making the time.
No, not at all, guy. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn or Insta or anything like that, obviously I'll give you my details. But I think one of the incredibly cathartic things for me in this space is the conversations. If anyone wants to connect, have the conversation, be part of a bigger network, then my door is always open.
Okay, I'll make sure the link's in the description.
All right, it's been a pleasure, Guy.
All right, thank you, sir.
Take care. Bye-bye.